comment on those. But I'm not quite sure in my mind whether the line of demarcation is about quantitative versus qualitative. I know that this is being a burning issue. I remember as an undergraduate there was a famous paper written on the need for the then an underground line called, I believe it was the Victoria line at the time, and somebody tried to find some quantitative justifications for why a new line might be better, including trying to quantify comfort in a railway carriage. So we as students then were asked to look at that study, and of course what we found was that in a sense, because this was published as a serious piece, and what we found was is that there is a certain communication problem. If you stay purely qualitative, you run into a communication problem. So it becomes a convenience that people try to put numbers which people are able to compare. If you can have ordinary rankings of things, but you find that it is easier for people if economics faces this problem a lot, trying to tell people that preferences are more ordinary rankings, and when people have tried to use quantitative, they run into all sorts of problems. But I assure you that there can be difficulties in coming across. So on the one hand, we must safeguard taking the numbers seriously. If I rank something, I might give 10 to the highest and 8 and so on and so forth. But what you are warned about is not to take the absolute numbers too seriously. Now, how untrained people are able to keep this, so when you start adding these numbers around and so on, is of course a nightmare. And it leads to a lot of misinterpretation of survey results. Having said that, I found that when I participated I didn't realize that it was an AfroBarometer policy meeting, so it was almost like a family meeting, and I was sort of amazed until I learned that this was a family meeting I'd walked into. I was amazed at the defensiveness of the AfroBarometer network. You placed a question on the agenda that you are finding that there's not enough use of the results of the AfroBarometer, and yet you don't want to hear any criticism. I found that very strange behavior. That if you have noticed that your product is not being used, it's supply driven, and moreover they were making false claims about what they are able to do. As a statistician, I need a lot of information before I can see how you move from correlation and regression analysis to causality. And to put a serious paper, except you think it's a family meeting so people will not question, to put a serious paper down and say that you are able to establish causality, I was amazed that you have got because serious university professors behind this type of thing, and they think you can put this type of thing out. As an economic statistician, I asked myself, and somebody working at the policy center, when have I found it necessary to use the AfroBarometer results, and for what? And so if I don't use it, why should I be surprised if other people don't use it? So whatever great things that the people themselves churning out these things, they think they are doing. I'm only reminded by Stolper's famous book about planning without facts. But at the core of my problem, I tried, provocative as I am, I tried to be more careful than people think. I deliberately said, look, to illustrate my type of discomfiture with what you are doing, it will be very useful to insist that whenever you carry out these surveys, you must always publish the percentage of, like spoiled ballots, you see, the percentage of answers which either was an aspect of no response. That this is a very important thing you must be publishing because it could tell you a lot. And what is behind that statement is this. What you get from a survey will depend on what questions you are posing, how you pose those questions, and from whom you are demanding answers. If you don't focus on that, in simple terms, a statistical sample survey is an attempt to study a population, but without using the census approach. So you've got to be very careful how you draw that sample. You want a certain sample to speak the truth of the population. So you must be clear which population you are studying. And that translates sometimes for the same human population. It can translate into what are you asking them. The famous thing that I used to give to illustrate this is if you ask my late mother that you are carrying out a survey on sources of energy in Ghana, and you go to sit in front of my mother, if you can even do the translation properly, and ask her about nuclear energy and solar energy and wind energy and fossil fuel energy, you're wasting your time and wasting your time because she can't even understand the questions that you are asking. As a young statistician at the then Central Bureau of Statistics, today's Ghana Statistical Service, I participated in a madiometric survey in Accra, and my boss was a sampling expert from Hungary called Gabor Paniski. One of the things that he left a mark on me was I was still an undergraduate in London, and the late Nana Rekwampin brought us down and justified it by saying that he thought that a little bit of practical experience would help us in our studies at London University. And so it was on that trip that I came and found this Hungarian expert, sampling expert, Gabor. And he encouraged me so greatly because he didn't treat me as just an assistant. He treated me like we were partners. And so whatever we did, he insisted that I made an input. And one of the great things he also taught me was that each time we organized a survey, or a survey was organized on